Hey, what is going on, everybody? I hope everybody's having a great evening, depending on where you are. It's a little late for me, but it's in the West Coast. You guys got it lucky. You're about 3 hours behind, so it's nice. I have a really special guest for you guys. Longtime voice of KNBR. He is I call him a draft savant for his knowledge of the draft. He is a former scout, and it shines through brightly with his knowledge on all things NFL draft. He is the Larry Krueger of the Krug Show podcast YouTube channel, the one, the only Larry Krueger. How you doing, Larry?
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me back.
Pretty good. I've been waiting on this one. I was trying to let some things kind of play out, like the Jimmy situation, but it still
Yeah,
hasn't. So,
we all been waiting on Jimmy.
yeah, for anybody who grew up during the 70s, I didn't. Well, I was born in 79. There was that the show that was called the $64,000 question. That's what the Jimmy situation is. But nothing has come of it. Before we get into anything with Jimmy,
Right.
if you want, with your new venture on YouTube now, and if you want to kind of tell people what's new and where they could find you and what your whole new, your YouTube channel and everything is all about.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. So, I was on KMBR from 97 through 05 and then 2011 through just a few weeks ago. And now I have moved over from terrestrial radio to YouTube, and you can catch my show. It's called The Krug Show. And we just started about 10 days ago, and we have about 2,000 subscribers. So we're really fired up.
That's
and
awesome.
Please go to The Krug Show and subscribe.
Definitely.
I'm going to basically talk what I know, which is the Giants, the Niners, the Warriors, the NFL draft, Bay Area sports. And we're going to have a lot of fun, and we're going to do some stuff during baseball season that's going to be really, really groundbreaking and unique. I don't want to give it away just yet, but we're going to be doing some incredible stuff during baseball season. And if you like listening to me either on post game Giants, Niners, Warriors, I think you're going to get that opportunity, and it's going to be good stuff. And we're going to have some great guests, and take phone calls, and get into the super chat and let people ask questions and that kind of thing. And I'm looking forward to it. So if you're a YouTube fan, or even if you're not a YouTube fan, go to the Krug Show, KRUEG show on YouTube, and check us out. And don't forget, subscribe.
Definitely. Don't forget.
Don't forget.
I was going to tell you, like, I'm a smaller YouTuber. I mean, I have 4,000 subs, but it's taken me a good time. And I was like, it took Larry in 10 days what it took me like a year and a half to get. I'm just like, damn. But you've been in the business. I'm not one of those people that gets like jealous or envious of people who have that experience from the outside ventures or whatever their job has been. So anytime I see them blow up, like immediately, I'm like, that's not a surprise. It's like the experience is there, especially what we're going to get into a little bit with your draft crushes. To me, you're one of the best people to listen to when it comes to the draft because of your scouting background. I just listen. I don't say anything because I mean, it's just amazing. You are, and I mean this respectfully. When I say a draft savant, I mean that in all respect. Like it's awesome. And I think the people who maybe have never seen you on here, when I ask you some draft questions, are going to be pleasantly surprised. So,
well, we'll see. This year I'm still very much a work in progress, but I've got certain favorites. That's for sure.
I guess the first question I'm going to ask you, again, the $64,000 question. If you guys grew up during the 70s or 60s, depending on when the game show was, the Jimmy Garoppolo situation. It's a giant eyesore. It's any metaphor or analogy you can use. It's that. Larry, do you think the Niners overplayed their hand and are now paying the consequences of it, or is it just one of those things where there's not really an explanation for it, and the Niners are going to have to do what's best for them relatively soon?
Well, I mean, it's so hard for me to say if they misplayed their hand. I mean, it's just so easy to say somebody else screwed up. It's I would say they didn't know what was coming. All they knew was that they wanted to, get some, um, something for Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't think they want to release Jimmy Garoppolo. Um, and they paid a second round pick, and I think at the end of the day, they may get close to that. I don't know if they'll get a second, maybe it'll be a third, but I think whatever. Why are they going to get this pick? Because people are like, well, the 49. Everybody knows 49ers have to release Jimmy Garoppolo. Well, the Niners are kind of showing you that there's a lot of different ways to manipulate around the cap, and they might not be able to extend Nick Bosa or Deebo Samuel um, until they move Jimmy, but that they don't even really want to extend those guys until they hit the field in training camp in July. That's when you're going to see extensions for those guys. So that's really their timeline. They can wait it out. They can wait it out through the draft if they want, and they have a commodity. They have a starting NFL quarterback, and not everybody does. And yeah, I mean, it's been kind of weird watching the parade of guys going from team to team. Watson's now a Brown, but there's still going to be. I mean, there's still few more teams than there are solid NFL quarterbacks. So they'll get something for him. I don't think it's going to be a first round draft choice, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was a day 2 draft choice and it might be multiple picks.
My whole thing is my only concern is with the Watson stuff, whether whoever started the rumor, sometimes it's not founded or sometimes it is founded. Just all the talk of like, oh, could Deshaun Watson be a 49er or is Jimmy Garoppolo going to stay here? My concern, I guess, is just, and I know Trey Lance seems like a tough-minded, very mature kid for almost being 22 years old. That it would be detrimental to him and his ascension into the starting quarterback realm and maybe affect him psychologically. Do you have that worry, or do you think the kid is wired differently and it's not going to bother him too much?
No, I mean I don't have that worry because his dad was a pro football player, and so this is the family business, and he understands it. He's a really bright kid, and also you got to remember, a lot of this criticism or people that are questioning it, it doesn't necessarily come from Kyle Shanahan or John Lynch or his teammates. So I think he's pretty insulated by his surroundings. He's not listening to me or anybody else. So I think he's one of the great things you have with Trey is you're getting the total package of great athlete, but he's also great mental maturity, and so he's not going to do what some guys will do, which is get pushed out of shape or lose confidence or turn bitter. He's just going to focus on what he can control, which is getting better every day. He's working with Tom House in Southern California. I'm sure he'll come back with better footwork and better arm slot and maybe greater accuracy. And he'll have better knowledge of Kyle's system in year 2. And I think it's up and away. I think he's going to play very well. And I know it's probably easier to say, oh no, he's going to suck or whatever, but
Yeah,
that's my opinion.
there is people who I've talked to, other streamers, and I've always brought up your take on Trey Lance when he was drafted, and you always one of the things you always say is like as far as a player, he's very heady, like he's smart. And I know for you as a person who was a scout or just a football fan in general, the mental part of the game more is the same, if not more important than the physical part, because you can have all the physical traits in the world. You could throw the ball, 70 yards, but if you're a mental midget and you can't process things, then it's useless. So when I think of like what you just said and what I've heard you say before, that's the one thing about when people say, is he going to succeed? Is he going to fail? I think the leg up that he has on a lot of some of these other guys that came out last year is just the mental maturity part and the ability to process information fast. So I'm glad that like there was a quote that I heard that he said that when he was around, I don't know if it was Kyle or other coaches, that he always wished he had a notepad because they were always something he thought that he could pick up from what they were saying and write it down. He's one of those people. He's like a sponge. So to me, above the physical stuff, and he's going to have his struggles. Everybody's going to struggle in the NFL because it's the NFL. I think the maturity part and the mental part is the part that I'm really excited about because I think, you know, some people can be crushed by a bad start to their career and never recover. And then there's, we'll see with him if, even if he has some struggles or the Niners lose a couple games straight and, the media's coming down on him, I think he's going to have the type of mindset that he's going to be just fine.
I mean, I saw Bill Belichick say this to Jimmy Johnson. They were on a boat. They were talking football and personnel evaluation, and they both agreed you can't coach dumb. If you got somebody who's not bright, it's very difficult to coach that person. So intellect matters. You got to process things really fast as an NFL quarterback. It's just kind of the name of the game. So it's a big part of having success, being able to, do these things and do them fast. That's a big part of it.
We were off stream. I was telling you about my friend, 49er minded Bashar. He runs the 49er YouTube channel, 49er minded. We were talking about you and him wanting to have you on his show. So that he just wanted to give you a shout out to the Bay Area legend, Larry Krueger. He's a big fan of yours too. So
I tell him I'll do a show. Just get a hold of me.
Yeah,
I'll do it.
Yeah, definitely. So Bashar, there you go. I saw him in the chat. I'm like, I just got to break away 1 second. Let him know. So, speaking of the quarterback stuff and the Jimmy Garoppolo, I can't believe I saw this deal for Watson. First of all, how surprised are you that he ended up going to the Browns? And two, that contract is just I've never seen anything like that for an NFL quarterback. What is your take on one, the Browns, and two, that just absurd contract that he got?
Well, I mean, none of it really makes any sense. I mean, I don't know why he chose to go to the Browns. The Browns are, they've struggled for years and years. They do have a good group of they get good talent there. You got Kareem Hunt and you got Nick Chubb and you've got some good receivers and you got a pretty good offensive line. Myles Garrett, some nice pieces. I mean, they've done a decent job personnel wise. So that's the attraction. But, he said he, wanted to play in a lot of different places and none of them reminded me of Cleveland. And yet here he is in Cleveland. So it's a surprise to me for sure. And as far as the contract, I mean, NFL quarterbacks make big cash. That's just the way it goes. So I don't begrudge him the contract. It'll be interesting to see how many games the league, suspends him. He could miss 6 games, 7 games, 8 games. I don't know. I don't know what the league's going to say, but I would imagine there's going to be a lengthy suspension coming his way.
You think him being off the market eventually will facilitate this Jimmy Garoppolo thing, and we'll get going?
I mean, now he's not going to New Orleans. He's not going to Carolina, and so those are now spots that Jimmy potentially could go. It's just and the thing about it is teams are always going to go for the better quarterbacks first. And then eventually they're going to go for Jimmy Garoppolo because Jimmy's better than most of the draft eligible quarterbacks. So I expect Jimmy to get dealt. Now, some teams may have some concerns about Jimmy's shoulder and want to wait till the summer, but I don't think the Niners are going to do that. I think you're going to see him moved before training camp comes around.
Yeah, it's to me, I feel like it's kind of the last piece of business that they need to take care of to kind of really transition into 2022 officially. Some people say that the Niners should have jumped on some stuff early and jumped at some deals early. I guess there was a report unconfirmed, so I don't always really pay too much attention to them, that there was a second rounder or a couple second rounders on the table. But
well, we've heard that report, but I mean, I don't know where it comes from, and I don't know how much validity to put into it.
Exactly.
I would say, they probably could get a day 2 pick for him. That would be my guess, because nobody views him as a backup. I think they view him as a starter. It's just he's not a top tier starter. So would you trade a 3rd round pick for your starting quarterback? I think most teams would if you didn't have a guy. So there aren't enough quarterbacks to go around. So I think they could get a 3rd round pick is what I would guess.
Well, let's hope that happens soon, because I don't know if it's true or not. I don't know if his money still being on the book affects free agent signings or what can be done as far as things in free agency. My next topic, a lot of it has to do with just some of the moves that have happened so far. I personally, I'm not of the mindset that you got to go out and get all the biggest names. But I understand, Like, I am envious of the Rams a little bit because sometimes the Rams give me a little bit of an Eddie D vibe from back in the day where, like, even if you've won or even if you're pretty damn good, if you can get that 1 or 2 players that are gonna push you over the top, you kinda take that shot. What's your, I got the names here. We got, I think it's Travarius Ward. We have the defensive tackle Ridgeway, Oren Burks, Ray McLeod, and George Adam, the safety slash special teamer. What's your thought on any of those guys? Are you overly impressed? Are you about it? What's your take?
I guess Ray McLeod's the most interesting. He's a little bit of a home run hitter. Should help them on special teams as a return guy. I'm worried about the fumbles. There's a lot. I think he had a number of fumbles this year, but
Yep.
he's definitely got big playability. So that's exciting. I like that pickup. Ridgeway's interesting. I mean, if he's healthy, that could be a decent rotational defensive tackle for sure. That one kind of stood out to me. Charvarius Ward is the guy who gets the biggest money, and he's a press man corner who can play outside. And they needed a starter outside opposite Emmanuel Mosley, so I like it. I like that. I like that pickup.
Would you, if you had anybody in mind that you would want the 49ers to maybe take a shot at, someone who's a little bit higher, have a higher, bigger name, say like a Tyrann Mathieu or it's really Tyrann Mathieu. I can't think of really anybody else. Maybe the Zadarius, the guy from the Green Bay Packers, the outside
Zadarius
backer.
Smith.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't see any true difference makers out there. I'd rather build through the draft and go that route than bring in. I like their philosophy, which was we're going to bring in some free agents, but they're going to be all on the younger side of things. They brought in 26 and 27-year-old free agents and not 32-year-olds. And I think that's a good idea because then those guys can kind of grow up with your team and you don't have an old team suddenly just because you went the free agent route. So, there wasn't any move out there that they didn't make that I wanted to see them make. Obviously offensive line, they let Tomlinson go. Are they going to bring in another player? That one is interesting to me. Are they going to bring in a guard? But I didn't see anybody out there that I thought like, okay, man, the 49ers really need to go get that player. I mean, DJ Reed was a good corner, but Charvarius Ward's probably a better corner. DJ Reed's more of a nickel corner. There's if you could get a free agent pass rusher like a Melvin Ingram or something like that, that would be nice. But they've got D Ford back, and I would like to see them re-sign Arden Key and maybe Jordan Willis. I'd like to see them re-sign K'Wan Williams. I wouldn't bother me if they re-signed Tart, but I think K'Wan Williams and Jason Verrett in their secondary. I'd like to see those guys back. I don't know if it's possible, but those, I think those guys serve a purpose for sure.
I'm not as big on K1. I feel like his play is diminished the last couple of years.
A lot of people feel that way. Hey, by the way, I'm going to run out of juice here. Can I get my cord here so I don't run out of juice?
Yeah, no problem.
Hold on.
Go right ahead. I see you on there, Bashar. You said he went to Baltimore. He actually backed out, Bashar, of the Baltimore deal yesterday, I think. I don't know where you are. Yeah, I think he backed out of the Baltimore deal yesterday, so he's actually still a free agent at this point.
All right, sorry about that.
No problem.
Wanted to make sure that we're juiced up.
Yeah, I was telling 49er Minded in the chat. He says that he went to Baltimore as Zadarius. I said, no, he actually backed out of that deal.
He did?
Yeah, yesterday.
He had been there before, hadn't he?
I think so. That's like the second or third player I've seen in free agency.
Because they're making these agreements and these guys hit each other for a living. And then ultimately you sit down in front of the doctor and, some percentage of these players have had off-season surgeries. I saw the one with Larry Ogunjobi was supposed to go to the Bears. Ogunjobi's a hell of a player. That was a great signing. and then they put him through the physical, and he had a knee problem, and they negated the move and moved on to the Chargers defensive tackle instead. So it happens. These agreements are made, but if you're investing a lot of times in these players' bodies, and if the body's broken, you want to upset your owner, just pour a huge amount of cash into a broken down player, and that's the quickest way to get fired in the NFL.
Unless you're Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch with D Ford, then for some reason it really doesn't matter. I mean, his 2019 season was great when he played, but that's been, I think, of their regime, that's probably the worst move. Even if you factor in Solomon Thomas and Reuben Foster, I think that's probably one of the worst signings moves of their regime. Do you agree on that?
Well, I would put Solomon Thomas in front of that. I mean, you had
Okay.
the third pick in the draft, and then somehow you wind up with, in a draft that had Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, and you needed a quarterback,
Yep.
and you wound up with low ceiling, defensive end / defensive tackle / in between combo defensive lineman Solomon Thomas. I mean, talk about falling in love with the kid's bowl game. He had a great bowl game that year against North Carolina. And I think the Niners probably just thought he was going to be a game wrecker. But, yeah, I mean, that was a really bad move. You could have had Marshawn Lattimore. I mean, there were several impact guys on the board if you go check that draft. They had 2 first-round picks, and they wound up with Reuben Foster and Solomon Thomas. So that's got to be close to the top of the list of the worst moves. I mean, giving D Ford, trading a second for D Ford, okay, but you could argue that D Ford helped you in the year that you won the NFC Championship and got to the Super Bowl.
He did.
The Solomon Thomas, Reuben Foster picks, they don't look too good right now.
No, they do not. Somebody in the chat just reminded me how old I am. I just turned 42. He said, "Serious, we haven't won a Super Bowl in 27 years." I'm just like, geez, I was 15 the last time he won. That's too long of a wait, man. That was tough this year because we fought so hard to get back and then to make it within 2 minutes of possibly getting there, and just to see the offensive line crumble at the end of that game. That was, I needed a little bit of time to recover. I was pretty hot after that game. I went on Twitter and went on a little bit of a diatribe about how, the Rams don't deserve it. Da, 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 da. Then I finally went on a Rams guys channel and was like, you know what? You guys earned it. Regardless if you pay through free agency, if you do it through the draft, the goal is to win a Super Bowl. You guys did it. I had to get off my high horse. It took me a while. It took me about 3 weeks, but I was pretty hot after that championship game for sure.
The part of that game that I had the hardest time with is that Deebo Samuel is so much the Niners' greatest star.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't touch the ball in the last 13 minutes of the game.
Just like the Super Bowl.
I don't think the Rams could have won that without Cooper Kupp touching the ball, in the final quarter of the game. So for Deebo, who, if he was a receiver only, that'd be one thing, but he's a running back as well. So you can manufacture touches for him, and he didn't touch it in the final 13 minutes. That one I have a hard time getting beyond, and that was my complaint in the Super Bowl as well. I mean, yes. Deebo at halftime in the Super Bowl against Kansas City was rolling, and he only touched it twice in the second half. So to me, if there's, you can play the what if game all the time in football. What if they had handed it to Frank Gore in Super Bowl 37 or 47 or whatever against the Ravens? What if they had run Kaepernick instead of throwing fades to Crabtree? To me, the biggest what if is, what if the Niners used Deebo against the Rams? What if they used him against the Chiefs in the second half of those games, in the fourth quarter of those games? Would things have been different? Most teams ride their superstars. If you go back to the Niners winning the Super Bowl almost any year, they didn't do it with a bunch of scrubs. It was Rice and Craig and, Jones and Young and Montana. I mean, their stars delivered. Your stars have to deliver for you in the moment. And for the Niners to not give Deebo a touch in the final 13 minutes against the Rams, that one, I don't even want to hear an excuse as to why he didn't touch it there. Just tell me you screwed up, because you screwed up.
Do you think some of that has to do with Kyle Shanahan protecting Jimmy as a play caller? And maybe that'll change with Trey, or is that just a Shanahan? He's got kind of the Chiefs head coach, Andy. He's got kind of that Andy Reid thing going on right now, where he just has trouble winning the big game or gets tight in big games with his play calling. Do you think is that more of a Shanahan thing, or was it a Garoppolo his inabilities or his the limits of his talent?
Well, I think it's a team game, right? So it's partly your quarterback isn't good enough. It's partly you're falling in love in too many situations with your passing attack and not running it enough. Um, and I think it's that those are the key factors, but there's always other factors as to why you lose. I mean, um, I don't think you can point to any one thing. Let's just say that. I mean, if Tart catches the pick, maybe that has an impact on the game. If Deebo touches the ball more, I don't know. I wouldn't criticize Shanahan as he's still one of the better coaches in football.
Oh,
I think if there's any common denominator of his struggles is that sometimes he gets impatient and gets away from the running game too soon. But in this particular game against the Rams, their offensive line just got whipped.
yes, they
Their
did.
offensive line got whipped up front, and Garoppolo under pressure, the numbers showed it. I mean, if you look at Jimmy Garoppolo, there's a stat that will tell you everything. And his efficiency under pressure is horrible. It's really one of the lowest quarterbacks in the league, and the Rams dialed up a ton of pressure. So the 49ers needed to do a better job on the offensive line, and they just didn't. They lost up front. And that's if there's one reason why they lost outside of Deebo not touching the ball, it's just that their offensive line could not block, Leonard Floyd, Aaron Donald, Greg Gaines, Von Miller. Those guys set the tone on the last two drives. And everybody wants to point to Tart, but come on, let's be honest. The Niners had two full offensive drives where they didn't move the ball at all.
Completely agree.
Tart, you can blame Tart all you want. Oh, he should have made that pick. Yeah, okay. They would have had it at their own 35-yard line. And who's to say they don't go 3 and out on the next drive because they went 3 and out on their last two drives. So
I totally agree.
I think the people who blame Tart are they don't want to blame Shanahan because then it's, you want to be critical of the popular coach. They don't want to blame Garoppolo, the guy who's played hurt all year and blah, blah, blah. It's easy to blame Tart, but it's not accurate to say that the thing's on him.
Are you one of those people who, if somebody plays injured, they can't use it as an excuse? Because I definitely feel that way about Jimmy. A lot of people are saying, well, he was hurt, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, dude, if you're playing, I don't want to hear it as an excuse. You either don't play if you're really that hurt, or because there's always been the one thing about the Jimmy Garoppolo era on the 49ers, there's always been a lot of, somebody said in the chat, a lot of built-in excuses. There's always a reason for something, like there's an injury why he played bad, or
right.
tap in, that's why he played bad. I've always hated that.
You got to own it. If you're out there, you got to own it. But I mean, it's not like, oh yeah, it's some side story. I mean, there's a saying in the NFL, by the time you get to the end of the year, everybody's hurt.
Yes.
Everybody's hurting. And the saying is, everybody's hurt. Tell me when you're injured. So, if you're injured, you can't play. If you're hurt, theoretically you can play. I think you have to factor it in. I know it's a convenient excuse, but I don't care. It's reality. You can't just pretend he wasn't out there with a bad thumb and a bum shoulder,
right?
And just be like, well, he should have been. These guys aren't robots. I think that's the one thing. It's such a TV show, and these guys are such modern day gladiators, and everybody wants what they want, and these fandoms are so wrapped up in it that they no longer see these players as what they are. They're people, and so they get fatigued, they get tired, they make mistakes. So the injuries, it's not an excuse, but it's an explanation. A partial explanation of why you fail many times.
Do you think the Niners having such an early bye and not getting, the number one seed, do you think that they just, because in a lot of ways it looked like they ran out of gas, especially in the fourth quarter? I mean, they got no pressure on Stafford, at least late in that game. a lot of long developing pass plays that seemed like the pass rush was non-existent. And it was, like the third downs, they gave up a ton of third downs. So what was it, like 11 for 19 or something like that? I forgot the
Right.
stat. I mean, did you think that played a factor of
They
them
did
playing
look
that long?
fatigued. I mean, I don't want to. I'm not gonna. It's not an excuse either,
Right.
but you play all those playoff games on the road and all that travel at the end of the year. You had the early season bye. It's not an excuse. It's just an explanation. I mean, they were fatigued for sure. I don't think there's any question about that. And then you got to give it to the Rams. I mean, the Niners gutted the Rams
Mhm.
multiple times this year. They challenged their manhood, and finally the Rams answered. They got physical when they had to, and they won at the line of scrimmage. So you tip your cap to them and give them credit. I just think that it's really difficult to beat a team 3 times in a row. And I thought in the last game, if you go back to the second game that the 49ers Rams played,
Mhm.
the Rams threw 7 passes to Cooper Kupp. He caught 7 passes. They ran the ball way too much because they were trying to show the Niners that they were tough. And so here comes all these runs to Sony Michel. And the Niners shut down that run game. But they never really shut down Cooper Kupp.
No.
The Rams just went away from him. They should have gone more to Cooper Kupp. They would have won that game. Instead, they went away from him to show the Niners that they're tough too. And they showed they were tough and they lost the game. Then you fast forward to the playoff game, and the Niners, who would never stop Cooper Kupp in the second game, didn't stop him in the playoff game either. So, and then in that game, they were smart enough with the game on the line to go to Cooper Kupp. So the Niners never showed that they could stop Kupp. They didn't have a number one corner. That was the weakness in their defense, is the defensive backfield play. And they just didn't match up. And the pass rush for the Niners was good. But in this game, it was just a tick late. And unfortunately, they couldn't disrupt the incredible rhythm of Stafford in this last playoff game. And he made just enough plays to get it done at home, so credit them. They were the more physical team in that playoff game, and I think that had a lot to do with why they won.
Tommy Huxley in the chat. Thank you for this $2 super. He says, I'll never tip my cap to the goddamn Lambs. I was really rough on them, Tommy. I didn't give them any credit. I was kind of a hater. But then somebody reminded me in the comments a couple days. He's like, the Niners went all in '94, right? And I'm like, you're right. They
They
did.
did.
They
Ricky
spent
Jackson, Richard Dent, Gary Plummer, Ken Norton, drafted Bryant Young, drafted William Floyd, drafted Lee Woodall, and went after a bunch of guys. Tim Harris, Ricky Jackson, Dent, Dion. They stacked up. That was the Carmen policy. They loaded up that year, and they got it done.
They did it a couple other times in the late 90s with getting like Chris Dolman and Kevin Green and, a lot of aging veterans. But I think Green Bay by that point was just
yeah, they were too good.
They were way too good. Somebody in the comments, his name is Rija, and he keeps saying that Bosa fades in the fourth quarter and that he disappears in big games. I thought he was the MVP, the Super Bowl defensively. I just think that, other people didn't step up around him, and he was held quite a bit. But yeah. I thought Bosa in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs was all over the field. But he can't do it by himself. He's one man. He gets tired. If you ever watch Bosa at the end of most games, he looked like he just got in a street fight. I mean, that dude looks whipped. My brother's
one thing to remember is that, and I have to go back and look at the snap count, but the Niners played a lot of D linemen in their first playoff games. And in the NFC Championship game, I think Bosa played a lot of snaps. The Rams found a way to win the time of possession. One of the things that had been a key for the 49ers this year is that they won time of possession. And the Rams were able to win time of possession against the 49ers in that championship game and keep Bosa on the field. And you take any pass rusher, if they can play 40 plays, man, they're going to be a whole lot better than if they play 65. And, if they wind up playing 70 plays or more, a lot of times those guys are gassed. So I don't see anything about Nick that makes me think this guy fades in the key moments.
No.
But I just think in some of the biggest games, they want to put their best players on the field. So they, instead of using him in a full rotation, they limit their rotation. And sometimes in some of those games, because of how hard he plays and how many snaps he has to play, that he's run out of gas a little bit in some key games. But it's not because of lack of effort. It's just because of overuse, in my opinion.
JC says he gets double teamed a lot. Bosa makes the whole team better because they have a
Yep.
double team. Oh, dude, Bosa to me affects everything. That's why I know Chandler Jones is old, and a lot of people are saying, you don't want to, blow your stack on, all these old and aging people. But I would love to see somebody across from him. Somebody was saying, oh, let's bring in Kerry Hyder. I don't want Kerry Hyder. I want a speed rusher. I want a, even if he's a one-trick pony like a D Ford, somebody on the other side needs to take away some of that pressure. And like you said, D Ford down that stretch, amazing. Um, they were a ridiculous. I mean, that defensive line that year with Armstead and Buckner and D Ford and Bosa was just, that was one of the best defensive lines I've ever seen. I mean, just the amount, like that game against the Browns when we were on Monday Night Football, that was one of the most satisfying games I've ever watched as a Niners fan. Just seeing them physically whoop the Browns and putting, all the hype around the Browns going into that year and how good they are and how many good players they have. To see that just total ownage was quite nice. It reminded me of the old days when we pretty much would just, beat the brakes off of teams and they would quit. So it's kind of, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at as far as like getting another guy for Bosa, because he needs it. He can't do it all on his own. And I think fatigue and playing a lot can also lead to injury. So I would like to save the guy too, so we'll see, I guess.
It would be nice. There are some guys in this draft who come flying off the edge, who run in the 4.5s, the Minnesota kid, Boye Mafe. I like Jeremy Gunter quite a bit from Coastal Carolina. Some of these guys had incredible workouts. I mean, guys were flying and running the 4.5s, 4.6s at 260 pounds. It's a pretty good year for edge rushers. So I would say when they're on the board at 61 in round 2, if they don't get a higher pick or don't trade up, I think edge rusher is probably one of the positions they'll highly consider. And, if you could add a real speed threat, I mean, the Rams had a good line with Floyd and Donald. They could have easily just gone with what they had. But when you add a third guy like Von Miller, now it's like pick your poison. What side are you going to slide the line to? Who are you going to block? Who's getting one-on-one? Because somebody's getting one-on-one. And if that's somebody's Von Miller, he's going to Canton. You're going to block Von Miller one-on-one. So they already have a good defensive line. But yeah, if they could add either a dominant interior rusher or an edge rusher with some big time speed or both, I think that would make it even better.
Speaking of, I forgot what I was going to say. We were talking about Bosa and pass rush. So you did mention Melvin Ingram as a possibility.
Yeah.
And someone in the chat kind of chimed in with the same thing. I mean, I would do that still and then still try to draft someone as well. I wouldn't just sit on Melvin Ingram and say, okay, we're good. We got our guy. I wouldn't mind doubling down. With the draft being the way that it is, or with the Niners having as many picks as they do with like all the compensatory picks that they've gotten, and if this Jimmy Garoppolo trade ever transpires, are you against them, getting a bunch of picks and trying to trade up into the top of the back end of the first round, or are you content with them sitting right where they are and just letting the best player fall to them?
Well, I mean, you're always going to have a player that you want badly, and then you got to look at your roster. Now, I personally think that they're at a point in their history where they're so good on day 3 and after the draft with undrafted guys at finding players that fit their schemes that I don't think I would trade up. If anything, I would trade back.
Okay.
If they just make a couple of astute trade backs or get a couple of draft assets for Jimmy Garoppolo, they could have a 15 or 16 or 17 player draft. And let's just say of that group, a dozen of those guys make your roster. You add 12 young football players to this roster right now, you're going to have a very deep team. And then you got to coach them up. I just, every draft has elite players and then there's a cutoff. And if you can get into that elite group, do it. But if you can't, I'd rather kill it with numbers. I'd rather. I mean, look at some of the guys. Look at some of the picks they've made on day 3. George Kittle in the 5th round, DJ Jones in the 6th round, Raheem Mostert as an undrafted free agent, Elijah Mitchell in the 6th round. I mean, they've made some really good picks on day 3 and after the draft. So I don't want to. I'd rather them take more bites out of the apple and take their chances, because I believe in their scouts' ability to find big time players. Sometimes even on day 3, sometimes after the draft. I mean, Azeez Al-Shaair, undrafted free agent.
Yes.
They've shown on almost every level of their defense and even offense as well that they can find guys. They've been able to find guys who they can plug in. So I would go the other way. I would rather see them trade back, have a 15-person draft class, and then, have an incredible deep roster filled with guys that can play.
Tommy Huxley in the comments, I don't know what this means. He says, Larry, no more leverage, McLeverage. I don't know what that has anything to do with.
That's what he's a real fan. That was my nickname for DJ Jones. I called him Leverage McLeverage.
I love DJ Jones.
And so, I didn't like, I was a big fan of DJ Jones. I didn't like the fact that they lost him. And I'd given him the nickname Leverage McLeverage. And I said that on a show with Gary Radnich, and he laughed and laughed and laughed, and we had some fun with it. So it kind of took off from there.
Clown Man says, finally a man with optimistically driven positive views. Cool job, pal. I must say, like, I do like building through the draft myself, but sometimes, when you see a player out there on free agency who you think could kind of, as they would say, turn the tide or give us a competitive advantage, and the Niners kind of go with the more, pedestrian signing of someone a lot of us have never heard of. It gets to me a little bit sometimes, because I feel like if we're that close, why not? But I also do believe in building depth through drafting. My brother's a Dolphins fan, so he's really big on McDaniel. And we were watching games this year, and he was telling me, he's like, dude, you guys got linebackers all over the place. He's like, your team is, I told him, I said, we have one of the best when it comes to like undrafted guys. I said, I don't, like, for instance, with running backs, I don't worry about running backs with the 49ers, whether it's Kyle or his father, or, what's his name? Bobby Turner, who's taken the year off. They just seem to find people talent wise that you would think, like, and they did it back in the day with Terrell Davis or whoever that they had at running back in those,
Mike Anderson, Alandis Gary, Portis. Yeah.
Yep. So
all those guys.
Where we fall short a lot in the early part of the draft, we seem to make up for it. You do want to hit, though, early. You don't always want to have to be like, yeah, we got this guy in the 6th round. I mean, I think a lot of people were saying this past draft was a kind of a redshirt year, and that the Niners drafted a lot of guys for this particular season. My question to you is, losing Laken Tomlinson, and I don't believe you should pay a guard a ton of money unless he was like Larry Allen or something, or, guys like that back in the day. You think the Niners do anything with that, or are you content with Aaron Banks going into next year and him shoring up that left guard spot? I mean, because I'm a little bit weary myself.
Well, I mean, why wouldn't you be? I mean, he was a 2nd round pick who couldn't even be activated as a backup for more than 2 games all year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Lynch has maintained that the guy's a player, and that for whatever reason he didn't play this year, he wasn't ready, they didn't have an opportunity. He's insisting that he's a good player. I'll trust John Lynch for one more year. I mean, he's going to get an opportunity, Aaron Banks is, to go to camp and be the starter at left guard, unless they go sign a free agent that I'm not anticipating. I think they will sign some guard between now and camp, or draft a guard. But I think Banks is going to get a shot, and I hope he can do it. I don't really know if he can or can't. I mean, he's a big athletic guy, but what kind of shape is he in? What kind of movement ability does he have? What kind of technician is he? A lot of people want to see him at right guard. He played left guard at Notre Dame. It's not as simple as,
No.
just put him at right guard. It's not quite that simple. And yet something tells me that if he were really a future star, that he would have gotten out there this year. They would have seen that. But I don't know what to make of it because Jalen Moore is a nice young player as well. He looked good at left tackle. He started there all throughout the preseason. And then he couldn't get on the field and then couldn't beat out Tom Compton at the end of the year. So I like Banks and I like Moore as prospects, but we got to see it, and it's got to start this year. And they're going to have, I would imagine they're going to show up in camp with an opportunity to not just win a job, but win a starting job.
Someone in the comments, his name, where'd he go? Gerardo Martinez, he says, will D4 contribute and stay healthy? I seen a post of his from IG of him sacking Russell Wilson, and I'm like, just move on, man. Let him eat whatever contract he has, because I know they added on some, fake, I call them fake years, because they're, they just added it on to that to drop his cap price. I mean, as much as I like a guy like Mostert and I like a guy like Verrett and I like a guy like Dee Ford, I think the Niners have kind of gotten to the point now where they really got to start taking guys either off their boards in the draft who have serious injury concerns or moving on from guys that, miss, seasons worth of games or 6 to 8 games a season. What is your take on that? For instance, with Mostert going to Miami, are you upset? Is it, what's your feeling on the whole Mostert thing? Personally, I'm not too affected by it, but that's just my personal opinion. How are you feeling about that?
Well, I like Mostert because he's fit for this offense. He can get to the edge at will. He's got great speed. And I thought there was a real, tantalizing potential option out there with the speed of Lance and the speed of Mostert. And could you imagine the mesh point when they're going in separate directions and how much space that would create against any defense? But you already stated it. I mean, the Niners have proven they've got a propensity to be able to find running backs in the draft. And I was looking at the running backs in this upcoming draft, and there's a ton of good ones. Ty Chandler from Carolina, BJ Baylor from Oregon State, Kevin Harris from South Carolina. I mean, there's just a bunch that, are going to be day 3 picks, undrafted free agents, and they're going to make NFL rosters. So it's such I wanted to see them re-sign Mostert like most people because I love Mostert's ability. He's such a big play guy. I mean, he had such an incredible playoff game a couple of years ago against Green Bay. Yes, but there's so many good running backs in the draft you can replace. I think you can replace Tomlinson in the draft. I think you can replace Mostert in the draft. As far as can you replace DJ Jones? Can you replace, a pass rusher? Can they find a corner? Those are more dicey. But those other guys, you can find a running back. You can find a guard. So I'm okay with them letting Mostert go. And then you also have Trey Sermon sitting there. You have Jermichael Hasty.
Yep.
You've got Elijah Mitchell. So you've got some good backs as is. And then they've shown an ability to find them. So it doesn't bother me that Mostert moves on.
Speaking of draft, you've mentioned some players like running backs and speed rushers. You have any other draft crushes? Any, regardless of position, guys that have kind of caught in your eye in these past couple weeks post combine?
I love Devontae Wyatt for Georgia, wore number 95. Jordan Davis is the guy that's getting the headlines because Jordan Davis is like 370 pounds or something, and he's just a monster, and he moves incredibly well for somebody that size. But if you watch the Bulldogs, Devontae Wyatt was the better player. And then he goes to Mobile. He was so impressive in the workouts that he stopped working out midweek and didn't even play in the game. I'm sure his agent just said, shut it down, man. You've shown enough here. Then he had incredible workouts at the combine too, where I think he was running in the 4.7s or 4.8s at 300 plus pounds. You can see him play to that speed on film. So I'm a big fan of Devontae Wyatt, who I think is, he could be a a 5 technique and a 3-4. He could be a 3 technique. He could be a 4-3 tackle. But he's 300 pounds. He runs well, and he's got great instincts. So that's kind of one of my favorite guys. I also love the guard or tackle from is in Northern Arizona, Penning, who was fighting everybody at the East-West game or at the Senior Bowl week.
Nice.
He's just a tough. He reminds me of Joe Staley. I like him a lot. So just a couple guys that stand out, and then I like a couple safeties. Nick Cross, who played at Maryland, another great athlete, can really run, could play that deep middle in a cover 3. I like Nick Cross quite a bit. And then as a kind of a sleeper safety, I like Wanye Thomas, who played at Georgia Tech. A box safety that will step up and really knock your block off. But, man, he's a hitter, and he's a little bit more athletic than you think. He's a little bit better coverage player than you think. And I think he may be there, late day 3.
There's a couple people here talking about Draft Crutch, Nevada wide receiver Romeo Dubes.
Yeah, I know Dubes. Dubes is good. Dubs, I'm not sure. It might be Dubs.
It is probably Dubs. I have horrible pronunciation. Marcus Jones, Houston cornerback.
Smallish corner, great return guy. He's probably 5'8" and change, 5'9". He's a very small guy.
That is small.
But he's got a huge heart, great ball skills, great break on the ball, great explosiveness, elite return ability. I think Marcus Jones, if you're the Niners and you've got, multiple picks in the 4th and 5th round, that range is where he's going to come off the board, maybe late 3rd, and he'd be nice. I like Marcus Jones.
Would you be against the Niners with their first pick in the 2nd round, drafting a safety?
No, not at all. In fact, Leon O'Neal from A&M, I think, is terrific. Louis Cine, who played for Georgia, is, incredibly fast, and he times fast, and he played fast. He was great for the Bulldogs. Georgia had the best defense in college football this year, and Cine is a terrific safety. So, I'll say this. I wouldn't draft a safety based on just his film, but if he had great, in round 1 or round 2, but if he had great film and great measurables, I would. So I got to see the safeties. I wouldn't do it for a box safety who can't play coverage in a passing league where the dime is, you're nickel and dime 70% of the time.
Yes, you are.
But if you have a guy who's like, can play coverage like a corner, can cover the field like a free safety, has great wheels and plays to those, you can see that speed on the field. Then I'd be really interested.
JC in the comments ask you, what's your opinion of Ambry Thomas?
I like him. Another guy, big, strong, fast, and he showed up in camp and he looked terrible. And then all of a sudden, it was really because he hadn't played for a full year because of COVID. And as the season went on, he got, increasingly better to the point where at the end of the year, he may have been their best cover guy. He still has more to learn, but there's a lot of potential there. He's got size, speed, long arms, tenaciousness, and he's shown the ability to learn. And he survived his baptism of fire, and now he's come out the other side as a much better player. So, yeah, I like Ambry Thomas and the potential that he possesses going forward for sure.
I really think that, if he gets, a lot of the talk last year was just him having another offseason to get stronger. You know what I mean? Just winning some of those jump balls. Cause a lot of times he was in position. He got out physical. Do you know what I mean? So hopefully, these guys are taking the offseason as seriously as we do. Especially guys like me who are just YouTubers and putting out our opinions. Hopefully they take it just as seriously, but
many of them do. I would say this, most scouts will tell you the biggest improvement you'll see in a player, in a season comes from like week 1 to week 2. But the biggest improvement you'll typically see in a player career wise comes between year 1 and year 2, because you got a whole year to put your arms around the schemes, and the complexity of NFL football compared to college is far greater. The speed of the game, you get an NFL weight room, you get stronger, faster, more sudden, quicker, and then you have greater knowledge. So usually that guys who were drafted, if you really want to know what they're about, check them out in training camp that second year in the league, and that's usually where you're going to see them, make a leap forward.
with all the stuff that's been going on this offseason with the 49ers coaching staff, the 14 new hires, um, I definitely saw I saw Clay Kubiak. I didn't know Gary Kubiak had a son that was coaching. What's your take on this complete coaching overhaul? Do you think anything of it? Do you think of any of it has to do with people not being sold on Trey and that they were allowed to move on to supposedly greener pastures, or was it just you know Shanahan and company letting guys walk? I'd heard a report from someone. I think you might have. Did you? His name is Javier Vega.
Mm-hmm.
He had a he.
I know
No,
Javier.
no, it wasn't Javier Vega. His name was Jesse Naylor. He's on the
Okay.
YouTube channel Last Second Sports. Real good, by the way. Uh, there was a tweet back in November talked about how like wide receiver coach, what the heck was his name? That was here last year.
Wes Welker.
Wes Welker and Scangarella were not big fans of Trey Lance, and that they would be let go or they would be moving on. This was like a tweet from like November, and then it ended up happening. Do you think any of that is connected, or do you think this is just more or less just a changing of philosophy and they're moving in a different direction with some of their coaching decisions?
I mean, it's possible. It's absolutely possible that there's some people that didn't see eye to eye. I would say overall, the 49er offense was pretty disappointing. I mean, it was a pretty disappointing offense. Weren't they 15th in the NFL?
Yeah, the Niners
Where were they offensively ranked? I think they were 15th, weren't they? They were a top 10 D,
yes,
but they weren't a top 10 O.
No.
And this team has Kittle and Ayuk and Deebo and, multiple number ones on their offensive line, arguably the best left tackle in the game. I mean, my goodness. I mean, they should have been better offensively. So it doesn't bother me at all that they cleared out some of their offensive staff. They needed to rattle their offensive coaches a little bit because
yes,
they underachieved offensively. And in addition to that, I mean, we didn't get to see any progression from Trey Sermon. He didn't progress as the year went on. So I don't know. I mean, I personally, it doesn't bother me that they switched up a lot of their offensive coaches because to me, the defensive side of the ball was, I mean, the defense kept them in it this year.
Yes, they did.
And I thought the offense, when you really look at their weaponry and how much money they've invested in that side of the football, they were hugely disappointing. So it doesn't bother me that heads rolled on their offensive staff because they won't talk about it publicly because they're too classy to do it. But ultimately, they probably weren't happy with what they got. I mean, when you have the kind of talent they had, they shouldn't have been fit. Kyle Shanahan and all those weapons, and you're not in the top half of the league offensively. That doesn't compute. And so it doesn't bother me that they're flipping some names on their offensive staff.
Run real quick one. Kittle. He seems to be a guy that has issues with health. And like you said, he didn't have as a productive a year last year as you would like. This is just me spitballing, throwing this out there. There's nothing behind it. And I've heard other people say this, including Grant Cohn. Would you ever consider moving on from a guy like Kittle sooner rather than later? Or are you of the mindset that he's going to have a big bounce back year and then and guys like me will be looking really stupid in about another 8 months?
Well, I've never believed that, you get ahead by trading your best players.
Okay.
I just don't believe it. Now, if you can find somebody who is at the end of their career and he still has value and you don't need that player anymore and you want to move them for picks, okay, I get that. But I've never understood trading the guy in his prime for picks, hoping to find the guy, the day you're trading him is the same. The next day you're looking for that player. So you mean Grant thinks that that George has got some ability, some propensity to break down because he thinks he's carrying too much weight. That he's really kind of a souped up wide receiver playing tight end, and that long term his body's going to break down. And I think that makes sense. I think that's probably pretty logical and probably pretty spot on. I think Grant's on that one, but I kind of push back in our discussion about it, saying that, not every player is like every other player. Some players on the team mean more to winning than just what they do because they're culture setters or tone setters or they're marketing people like, like you're marketing the team by having them on your team. And George Kittle, checks all those boxes.
Yes, he
He's
does.
one of the first guys they market. Not that that's a reason to keep him, but it's a factor. You're still selling tickets. You're still trying to play to an audience. So, that's a factor. And then you look at George Kittle as a player. He's been productive, but then when George Kittle's on the field, he's a tone setter. And
Yes.
I hate trading tone setters on either side of the ball because there's so few guys like that. So many people kind of go along with the flow and play to the tone of whatever it is. There are very few guys that say, no. The tone, we're setting this tone. It's going down this way. Dante Whitner was like that.
Oh, yes.
Alex Boone was like that.
Yep.
Sometimes it's your best players. Sometimes it's just a really solid player on your team. But George Kittle sets a tone. So I would not be in a rush to deal him because I think there's value in that.
Speaking of, players and trading them in their prime and players being in their prime, less to do with the trading, more about players being in their prime. One player that's in their prime, the 49ers, I really think need to figure out what they're going to do contract-wise is Deebo Samuel. With the market being thrown off kilter by the signing of Christian Kirk and what Trent Baalke did down there in Jacksonville, I'm just disgusted by. What are we looking at with the Deebo contract? If they are to extend him, like many think that they will, are you thinking they're pushing $30 million a year?
Christian Kirk got $84 million or whatever it was. It was, and who the hell's Christian Kirk? He's a total nobody.
Right. Exactly.
Relative to Deebo. Yeah, Deebo's going to get paid. There's no doubt. And then, that's part of why they have to trade Garoppolo. It's because they can't really extend Deebo and Bosa and round out their roster and have Garoppolo. That Garoppolo quarterback savings that they're saving by going from Jimmy to Trey, that money's going in the pockets of Deebo and Bosa. Others as well, but specifically those guys. So as far as what's the exact dollar figure, I'm probably the wrong person to ask on that. But he's going to get paid. He's going to get paid a lot.
The Niners, I've heard today that the cap might be going up significantly, upwards of $70 million in the next couple of years, either the next year or the year after. Our team's going to, I know the Niners are not big on free agents, like I would like them to be sometimes. Do you think the Niners, if they ever do try to overpay for anybody, they might start, coming, say, next season and start pushing it down, the can down the, kicking the can down the road with the cap going up? Or do you think they're going to still kind of just operate the way they've been doing and building through the draft and very seldomly, grabbing guys out of free agency?
I think they're going to be judicious with it, but also recognizing that their window to win is open. There's great urgency, I'm sure, from Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch to win a Super Bowl. They've been to a Super Bowl, but they haven't won one, and they know the difference. The organization judges itself based on Super Bowl, trophies in the trophy case, and they've gotten there. They haven't climbed that mountain. So I do think they'll be aggressive if they believe they're in their Super Bowl window, and I do believe they think they're in their Super Bowl window now. So I think once they move Garoppolo, I think you'll see them add to their roster and then extend some key players. But they're always going to be judicious. They're always going to try to pick, players that, I don't think they're going to go for older free agents and load up for one big year.
Okay.
I think they're always going to they're going to build through the draft, and then they're going to try to shop for the lower, the younger free agents to try to round out the roster.
Last question for you before I kind of let you have the floor for a second to let everybody know again where they can find you.
Sure.
If another free agent you wouldn't mind being signed, just off the top of your head, anybody in particular, Tyrann Mathieu, or like you mentioned, the pass rusher that was from the San Diego Chargers as a free agent right now,
Melvin Ingram.
Anybody come to mind, or are you kind of just already kind of turning your eye to the draft?
Well, I'll tell you the one that will make me go, what? Is if they sign Rob Gronkowski. because I got to think Gronk is going to wind up wherever Brady is. And I don't think there's anything to the Brady to the Niner rumors anymore. But if all of a sudden tomorrow they sign Gronk, get ready for more Brady to the Niner rumors. So that's the free agent signing that would make all the podcasters run to their cameras and say, let's do a podcast right now, emergency podcast. Niners have just signed Gronk. That's the one. As far as, who else is out there and what can be done, I haven't, looked too deeply into all the free agents that are left out there. I know there's been some Juju Smith-Schuster rumors. There were some Jarvis Landry rumors. There's people, begging for Kyle Shanahan to sign Julio Jones. That to me, that's going to be kind of an interesting thing. Do they bring in another wide receiver? As I said, to me, it's more like, I think the greater value might be in just re-signing Verrett, who's a Bay Area guy from Fairfield, and maybe re-signing K1, who is a team leader, and possibly bringing back a couple of Jordan Willis, Arden Key. That might be their best move right there. Is get Jimmy traded, try to re-sign Bosa and Deebo to extensions, and then maybe bring back some of those free agents that you liked that were on your team. But if they're looking for an outside name, yeah, it's tough. I'd have to really look at the list. But Juju Smith-Schuster is interesting to me because I think he's also young.
I think
he's big and he's physical and he can do stuff after the catch.
I think Juju signed.
Did he sign?
With
today?
Kansas City.
Okay.
Kansas City.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of player would be good. They do wind up getting a player instead of a pick, or maybe some combination of a player and a pick.
Larry, I am truly grateful for you to come on for, I think,
anytime.
The third time. You have been, since I started listening to KNBR, I think back in 2012. You were my guy for the Niners post-game wrap the one thing I liked about you, even on radio, where you have to have, you have the FCC and everything, you weren't afraid to kind of push back, against the Niners. Sometimes people, depending on what their relationship is with a team, they don't really criticize or say, things that a lot of fans are thinking. So that was always my biggest thing with you. And now that you have your own YouTube channel, you can say whatever you want, as long as it's not like a whole bunch of curse words. But that was always my thing. So the fact that I've heard you on radio, I've seen you, other places, KNBR, clips on and then I've had you on. It's like to me, it sounds really kind of like fanboy, but it's a dream come true for me because I hold you in very high regard. So I appreciate you coming through. And if you want to let everybody know where they can find you, the floor
Absolutely.
is yours.
Yeah. I'm going to be doing, I'll be doing my YouTube show, the Krueger Show on YouTube. Find me, subscribe. We're going to be doing some great things during baseball season. For you, what you mentioned, you said you like to hear me on Post Game Niners. Something tells me you're going to be able to hear me on Post Game Niners, maybe
awesome.
via YouTube, but I'll be doing Post Game Niners. That's one of my favorite things to do, and so look for that coming up. And you know what? I'm always going to push back because I've got strong opinions, and sometimes my opinions align with the team, and sometimes they don't. That's that. When you work for the team or the flagship station, that's always the challenge. When you work independently of that, that's no longer a challenge. So I think the post-game version of yours truly is going to be better than ever. So check it out on YouTube, The Krueger Show. Tell your friends, subscribe. There's merchandise there that you can buy. You can buy Krueger Show T-shirts.
Might have to do that.
Yeah, they look very, very cool. Saw them today. We'll have them up shortly. And I'm just really excited. So, if you subscribe, you'll just be alerted as to when I'm on. And then check me out. And then we're going to do a bunch of stuff coming up during baseball season, right into football, and we're going to have a lot of fun. So Krueger Show on YouTube.
Everybody subscribe to the Krueger Show. It's a great YouTube channel. Like I said, you say you have over 2,000 subs already?
Right around there,
That's
maybe about
freaking.
more like 1700, 1800, something like that.
That's
It's only been about 6 or 7 days, but
That's awesome.
we're working it hard.
I try to share your stuff as much as possible because I'm like every time because you have so many connections from your radio days. So like a lot of people that you see on the channel are like the guys that anybody who's from the Bay Area knows. So
Sure.
I'm a big. I wish you could steal Dennis Brown and who's the other
John
guy?
Lund.
John
John
Lund. I
Lund.
freaking love John Lund.
Yeah,
Freaking
he's
love
a
him.
great guy, man. He's a great guy.
I think I've
Terrific
reached out
guy.
before. I never got a response because I've like that's another guy who kind of says what he says
he's
about the
good.
Niners and doesn't really care. Because, like I said, there's depending on what flagship you're part of, a lot of guys just kind of they always kiss the butt of the local team and never really go in. That's what I like about markets like New York and Philly, where they just kind of like lose their mind. But that's a whole other thing. So
right.
but,
No, but John's a good man, and John Dennis it was that it's one of the things I'll really miss is doing those Niner post games with those guys.
I don't think I could listen to without you there. To be honest with you, unfortunately,
you don't have to. You can.
I'll come to your channel, right?
Check me out on the Krueger show for Niner post game, and we'll have some great stuff in Niner post game because I'll make sure we get cool guests, and it'll be some great stuff.
You asked on Twitter who you'd want, or it was your community tab. I said Steve Young. I answered you. I want Steve Young on your channel.
Steve Young is a friend, so I'll reach out to Steve Young. We'll get him on.
He's an interesting cat because he's just interesting to listen to. He's got a different spin on life and the way he talks about things. Same with Brent Jones.
He's smart and he's independent, and I love Steve.
And like you says, he's got a lot of that FU money. So
that's right. He doesn't need it, which makes him good at it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Everybody in the chat, thank you so much for coming in strong tonight. Larry, appreciate you coming on. I would love to do this again. Maybe
we will anytime
post draft or something.
Yeah.
This has been a freaking blast. I had so much fun. So everyone, thank you for coming through, Larry. Like I said, it really means a lot to me. To me for you to come on. So appreciate it very much. And until next time, everybody, stay safe and healthy. And like I always say, I'll see you guys on the flip side. See ya.